Welcome to the SDC Weekly Address for Sunday, February 7th, 2010. Today we're going to talk about, basically continue the topics we dealt with last time. So we'll talk some more about the Book of Urantia and related subjects, and talk some more about radionics and the Delaware book, or things, spin-offs from the Delaware book, as recommended by the Douglas Cottrell readings, New Worlds Beyond the Atom, and I'm getting more and more books on that topic. And some interesting connections there, so we'll get on to that. But so the Book of Urantia, I've been, of course, plowing through that rather steadily ever since I got it. And first of all, the more I read, the clearer and clearer it was that it's portraying a picture of a world in which this existence, our existence on Earth, is our first existence. It's the beginning of our existence. And there are even a few places where it specifically talks about reincarnation, specifically talks about how there's only one example of reincarnation in the universe, and it's some other type of life form on some other type of planet. It's not even us. It doesn't even have to do with really mortal existence on these starter planets, if you will, or whatever you want to call them. So, again, it seems to be portraying a very similar world-life perspective to the one that Andrew Jackson Davis was portraying. And with Andrew Jackson Davis, it was easy enough to write it off and say, well, he just wasn't dealing with reincarnation. With the Book of Urantia, it's pretty clear that it's taking a definite stand against reincarnation, and it even outlines how belief in reincarnation developed in the various religions where it developed and why, and how it's really based on superstitions and has no basis in revealed truth. So there you have it. But before we completely throw it in the trash, which I'll tell you, I was getting to a point this week where between that stance and between its stance on the virgin birth, the Immaculate Conception of Jesus Christ, I was about ready to just say, okay, forget it. But still, there are a lot of compelling things about the work, and I'm never going to just throw something into the trash out of hand. And I think you've got to think very long and hard before you take a work of this quality and self-consistency and say it's all garbage. Because yeah. So in the middle of me being completely disillusioned about the thing, I began reading the section that dealt with the beginning of the life of Christ. And according to the book, okay, so for a second, let's give it the benefit of the doubt. Let's say, okay, the book is actually correct when it says that it is revelation from celestial beings that are far, far, far above humanity in the scheme of advancement and holiness and perfection. So beings that definitely know what they're talking about from their perspective. So let's give it the benefit of the doubt. What does it say? Well, when it gets to the point where it's talking about this incarnation of Christ, Michael. Now, according to its world system, Michael was the Son of God that was delegated basically absolute authority in our universe as far as creation of this universe and oversight of the universe. However, initially, apparently, when he took that office, like others of his kind, Michael shared that responsibility with 2 or 3 others in some capacities. So thus he didn't have absolute authority over this universe in which we live. And apparently, according to this book, after he took office, over time he spent a lifetime of sorts as each one of the major types of his subordinate creatures. So there were seven incarnations. So he began with a type not too far removed from himself and ran a lifetime as one of those, and then went down a notch, ran a lifetime as somebody a little bit lower, until finally in the very last and 7th incarnation, he incarnated at the bottom rung, which is our rung, apparently, as a mortal. And that incarnation was as Jesus Christ, born in Bethlehem. And according to the book of Urantia, as far as what I've read so far, that was the one and only incarnation of Christ Michael in the flesh as a man on this earth. So this whole idea about Christ having 30 incarnations on earth, for the moment, we are giving this book the benefit of the doubt, and so, okay, that's what it says. So it gets to the point where it's talking about this stupendous, miraculous event that basically the most advanced being in our universe, and a very advanced being even in the grand scheme of things, not too many levels below God himself, this being somehow, an entire perfected spiritual entity, somehow incarnates as a mortal man, which there are lots of incongruities. It's like, how can God himself, basically, or a son of God himself, take on a human incarnation with all of its limitations? And there was a statement in there that really caught my attention. It said that not one being in the heavenly realms in this universe, from Michael on down, none of them could understand quite how that could happen. So realize what that's saying. It's saying that the birth of Christ was a paradox and a mystery that was beyond the comprehension of just about anyone but God himself. So no wonder we have these differing statements, like, oh, there was an Immaculate Conception, no, there wasn't an Immaculate Conception. Because in some sense, even though, yes, apparently a sperm did contact an egg cell and it was fertilized and the normal birth process ensued, as far as the human condition was concerned, this was something deeply mysterious and completely different. This was a son of God himself incarnating in the flesh, and none of these advanced beings that are authoring this book could comprehend how that really could take place. So how on earth could we expect to comprehend that dynamic? And here we are pigeonholing it into these simplistic ideas of this Immaculate Conception or no Immaculate Conception. When the truth of the matter, we haven't even the faintest clue of what it implies and what it means and what could even happen, and especially if these other much more advanced intelligences don't really even understand how it could have happened. So then, at that point, I was really relieved because I started to see, okay, doubtless the major limitation here, and the book even says this at the outset, the major limitation with a work that tries to reveal things of a scope and of a comprehensive nature of an advanced universe much beyond our own world, a work that tries to reveal the nature of that universe to us to a mortal that's incarnated on this earth in the flesh with all of its inherent limitations, tremendous limitations of comprehension, etc., the stupendous obstacle was our own limitation of intelligence. And so here we are, arrogantly saying, aha, that's got to be wrong because it says there's no incarnation. Or if you come from the other side of the fence, aha, Casey has to be wrong because he says there's incarnation, It's like here we are talking about things completely beyond our comprehension. And we're insisting that we have the wisdom to judge whether something is true or false based upon our simplistic compartmentalization of these ideas, of these concepts. And even, when you listen to the descriptions of the world life perspective, the cosmology portrayed in the various readings, even when they talk about reincarnation and things, there are lots of inexplicables, lots of unknowns. One of the main things that really hit upon me was, well, let's see, if the main reason we're separated from our higher self is because we have incarnated in the flesh and we have this bicameral brain, well, let's see, when we die and we leave the flesh and our subconscious mind becomes the conscious and the higher self becomes our subconscious mind, well, where's the obstacle there? It seems like all the obstacles between joining with our higher self have been removed. So don't we just automatically reach enlightenment when we die? And yet none of the sources seem to really be portraying that. And they did say lots of things like, we have a choice to come back here or not. We may not come back here next lifetime. We could go to Venus and learn something else there. We might not even be in the solar system. Listen to Casey. He talks about Arcturus as this central hub where we could go there and go to any of a number of other completely different areas of the galaxy or universe or whatever the grand scheme of things is. And it seemed like there was a lot of variability, a lot of choice. So definitely from the various sources, it seems you get this perspective where there isn't this traditional wheel of karma where you're stuck on this earth and you can't get off until you've reached a certain level. However, from a certain point of view, that is what the readings are saying, and it is what the Book of Urantia is even saying, because it says some very clear things like there are 7 basic rungs or circles of spiritual development, and if you are only at the 7th, which is the bottom, you're basically a little bit better than an animal. You're just the first rung beyond an animal, the first thing that could even be called man, which would have probably described a lot of mankind in prehistory. And then there are these progressions, defined by what you're aware of and what you're not, and what levels of benevolence and being concerned with your fellow man and implementing the golden rule and believing in it, those kinds of things. There are these levels. So you go from 7 to 6 to 5 to 4 on up, and it isn't, according to the Book of Urantia, until you've reached the 3rd level that you're going to go from death on this earth immediately to awakening within like 3 days in what it calls the Morantia realms, which would be the astral plane or the realms in between, and then be able to move on and continue your work. According to the Book of Urantia, for those that haven't reached that 3rd level, from counting from 7, 6, 5, 4 to the 3rd level, so it would really be the 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, really the 5th level, if you're counting the other way, until you've reached that. If souls haven't reached that, then if they've made a saving decision, meaning if they have an alignment where they do really want to go along with the higher self and they do really want to turn back to God, and they are interested in that, then those souls that haven't reached that level are apparently just held until these various times, like every 1,000 years or so, when there's like this big roll call of all the people that have died and that are survivors, is what it calls, and then they have the opportunity to go on to these other realms and then continue on through their stages of development at some far distant point of which they will eventually unite with their higher self and be this kind of perfected being, and then they'll really be ready to start what they're supposed to be starting. But that's a general perspective, and you can see a lot of relationships between this perspective and the perspective of reincarnation portrayed by the various readings. There are a lot of things that appear to be discrepancies, but I'm almost 100% confident that the limitation is ours. The reason they appear to be saying something different is because of our limited perception of how this can work. Sorry, I'm trying to like adjust the video. It just looks kind of weird because of the lighting. Someday we'll have this wonderful video studio with, yeah, whatever. This is more fun. But anyway, so don't kid yourself. If you actually pick up this book and start getting into it, I don't care which side of the fence you come from, whether you're just a pretty much straight up fundamentalist Christian reading something like this, or whether you're, especially if you're coming from the other side of the fence, well, maybe pretty much equal. No matter which side you're coming from, or you're coming from the perspective of these readings, there are going to be things that you're going to stop and say, oh, well, that can't be true, because this was, that contradicts this or that other thing that was said. And still, I'm getting even more and more convinced that the answer is not that it's all bunk. Okay, no, still, sure, I realize that there's some very slight chance that some very ingenious people got together and crafted this document. They did a damn good job. That's what they did. I mean, compared to the Book of Mormon and Doctrine and Covenants or whatever, this is a freaking masterpiece. Okay, and it's like, it makes the Book of Mormon and the Bible look like these crude shams in comparison. I mean, if it is a forgery, it's got to be the best, most cleverly done, the most cleverly written pile of bunk. Even you look at the Book of OASPE or whatever it's called, OAHSPE, that is, I think that's how it's spelled. So one of our listeners turned me on to that, which is another example of a very large work that claims to be revealed to a certain extent, and it seems so muddled and confused and disorganized and inconsistent, and that's what you normally expect from these kind of works. I mean, but what turned me on to these readings in general was how clear and self-consistent they were, and how they didn't really conflict. They were a very straight-up standard delivery, and every single one of these, from the Principles of Nature, the works of Edgar Cayce, the readings from Ross Peterson, from Paul Solomon, from Douglas Cottrell, they're all very self-consistent, very clear, and very definite. But when we start putting them together, we start to realize they're coming from different points of view, giving us different, slightly limited perspectives. And so you do start to see the truth of what that Cottrell reading was telling me, that no channel is 100% clear. However, it certainly appears that these angels and other entities that communicated these papers found a tremendously clear channel through which to communicate. It could very well be that whoever this man that they were communicating through was a far clearer channel, reaching whatever higher level of psychic awareness that Ross Peterson was talking about, reaching a higher level perhaps than even Casey himself. Casey was supposed to spend most of his time on the ninth rung and flirt around with the 10th a little bit, whatever the grand scheme of things was. And perhaps this guy is 10th or 11th or beyond type of clarity for these beings to be able to so clearly communicate through them. Now again, we don't have the raw readings in front of us, so I don't know what an initial reading would have looked like, how many questions would have had to have been asked and answered later, how much revision would have had to have been done to render it a complete statement. But it sure as heck appears that these things were just delivered flat out from top to bottom, as is. And I wouldn't be surprised if there was very little editing that had to be done to most of them. Probably it was more like there were some unanswered questions that would be asked, and that would result in another paper, not so much a revision of an existing paper in the book. Probably why the book is so long. So, from my perspective, in my opinion, I think what's going on here is we have some tremendous revealed truth in the readings, and then an overarching revealed truth that has come straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak, that has come straight from these beings involved in the administration and development and creation of our own earth and system that we're a part of. The very beings that are currently active in various roles in dealing with this place and all of the heavens beyond it are the ones purportedly that gave this message. So it's not just the higher self of the person giving the readings. This would be a case where the higher self is out of the way and just letting these people communicate, or just instantly parroting back whatever they're communicating. However, I'm not 100% sure how that process takes place. But for now, at least, my take on it, you can take it as the word of someone who has read a lot of this book. Now, I'm not sure exactly how much I've covered because I'm going on various topics, but I would say I've covered at least a quarter of what's written, and of the 2,000 pages, and take it from someone who has spent some substantial time already looking into the Book of Urantia, and substantial time looking into all of these other sources, and trying to look up lots of different things they mention to verify or clarify or whatever. And that's my viewpoint. And take it from a person that's done all that. This all looks like the real deal. And especially this book seems very, very important. Now, in the grand scheme of things, it differentiates between evolutionary religion and revealed religion. Okay? So evolutionary religion would be the religion that we haphazardly develop as mankind develops intellectually and spiritually over the course of time on this planet. But then revealed religion is whenever a higher spiritual entity like this does come through and start to clearly deliver some things. So there have only been, according to this book, aside from specific examples of individuals like Casey and Peterson, it does leave room for individuals like those, saying, yes, there are lots of others that have made major contributions, but as far as a higher entity directly coming and revealing religion, there have only been 5 examples or something. And the next to the last one, the 4th, was the life of Christ, when Christ, Michael, according to the book, was here himself, delivering whatever truth he felt was appropriate at the time in a way that would offend the least amount of people and help the people that were there on the earth at the time. And then the 5th, massive dispensation of revealed truth from higher sources, as in celestial beings, this book says, is this book. Now, on one level, you can say, yeah, of course, it's just promoting itself. On another level, if it is what it says it is, if it did come from who it says it came from, that's a stupendous statement. And if you start to read the book, it starts to seem quite believable, because it's got the feel, the vibe, if you will, of a book that was written by intelligences and higher powers far, far beyond us. It has the reek of a work that possesses a clarity that is the maximal clarity possible, given the limitations of our language and our thought and comprehension and the level of intelligence. So, in a sense, it seems like it could very well be the clearest, most uncorrupted and unobfuscated work of literature ever given to mankind. And the topic it chooses to cover is life, the universe, and everything, basically. Wow. So, the further I go on with the Book of Urantia, the more perplexed I get and the more impressed I get. And again, instead of encouraging you to throw out all these other faiths and religions and things that seemingly conflict, it encourages you to start with them, to see the truth in them, see the value in other faiths and religions and these historic documents that we have in other instances of the mixture of evolved and revealed religion that we have on the earth at this time. It says that all of them are valuable. All of them have valuable things to say. None of them may have the clarity of this book, but they all have valuable perspectives to impart. So I think it's very important not for us to get skeptical and dogmatic and sectarian and turn into bigots and say this or that teaching must be true. Anything that appears to conflict with it or directly overtly conflicts with it must be false, and start taking this sword and dividing everything up. Look, that mindset is what got us into this mess of having the sectarian religions we do of the day that can't even talk to each other, and this violent separation between science and philosophy and religion, when these things should all be complementing each other and working together and helping us see the universe around us. So I'm never going to take this stance where I'm going to arbitrarily say something is just out and out false, unless it from all appearances has the look and feel of something that's just carelessly thrown together and arbitrarily designed to manipulate people to do this or that, or make a fast buck or something. Or that's one thing that Cottrell Reading said. It's like, look at the motivation of the people that reveal this stuff. If you've got a large body of work that looked like it was carefully put together and well thought out, and the people that did it suffered all kinds of ridicule and detriment and risk of defaming themselves and God knows what else, and yet they did it anyway. And if these people didn't have any tremendous gain, if they would have gained a lot more if they just didn't say anything, but yet they persisted and did it anyway, well, there's probably a lot of valuable truth there. And so I think it really behooves us to keep as open a mind as possible and to not throw things out of hand. But boy, there are a lot of apparent contradictions. In a way, it's good, though, because in a way, I think this is going to help bring in the viewpoint of a lot of the fundamentalist Christian religions that otherwise would be just instantly turned away by a viewpoint portrayed like that of Casey or Cottrell or Solomon where they're talking a lot more about reincarnation, talking a lot more about things from a kind of an Eastern religion perspective, that instantly serves to, I think, turn off the vast majority of any fundamentalist Christian that would run across it. However, I think this book is going to be a golden key that enables us to tie it all together and to usher in a vast multitude of individuals from fundamentalist Christianity that are at a point where they are hungering and thirsting for more of the truth, for getting closer to God, and instead of languishing in their sectarian bigotry. I think there's a vast multitude of those people out there, and I think they can be reached. They can be reached by an understanding of the limitations of our perspective that is much greater than the limitations of the revealed religions that we have, or the revealed religious documents that we have in the various faiths. So, anyway, fittingly, there's a half hour of that. However, that's not all I've been doing. Reading more about the SE5, which is seemingly the most advanced radionic device that I've discovered. Now again, why are we talking about radionics? We're talking about radionics because the Douglas Cottrell readings again and again mention, just like the Paul Solomon readings, that there's a rate of vibration of some type of all living and non-living matter that can be tapped into and affected through resonance. And by doing so, we can tremendously improve the health and the longevity of ourselves and improve the quality of life on Earth. And the name he mentioned again and again was Delaware. Delaware's book, New Worlds Beyond the Atom. Langston Day and Delaware. And there were several other books, but this was the book. This was the book they had. They showed me after the session that the source said they would show me. And in the book, it's all about radionics. Delaware was one of the founding researchers, one of the earlier pioneers in the field of radionics. And what is the field of radionics? Well, voila, the field of radionics is this field that studies a vibration, a frequency, characteristic signatures of frequencies of all living things, of various conditions of health and disease and various organs and things, and how those can be manipulated to improve health and to improve all kinds of various conditions of our experience. And not just us, plants. They can improve the productivity of crops, etc., etc. So this whole field of radionics appears to be nothing but a field devoted to this very topic that we're told is so valuable in the Cottrell and Solomon readings. This topic of this rate of vibration. And in the Cottrell reading, he talks about how my research with lasers is verging on, it's bordering on this new field of endeavor where mainstream science begins to realize, and medicine begins to realize, that there's a more fundamental overlying energy, spiritual energy and order behind all physical existence. That if you understand that and understand how to begin to interact with it, you can treat all of these illnesses and diseases a lot closer to the source than you are if you're just using, what's it called, allopathic medicine, where you treat things just by their symptoms. And I definitely am very interested in it. So where has it led me? The Delaware book led me to radionics. Radionics led me to looking at what's currently going on in the field of radionics. It has not died. It is a growing and a living, very, very independent field from mainstream science, but a burgeoning, a very robust field in and of itself. So it seems like one of the key devices, one of the most advanced devices in the field, if it does what it says it does, is the SE5 by Don Paris. I think he's the guy that wrote this book, which is kind of a manual for it. Regulating Wholeness Through the Subtle Dimensions by Don Paris. So this book serves as kind of a manual for the SE5 if you did get one, and also an overview of his philosophy and where he came from, what's behind it. So I get this book just, to see more about this device and see if this guy knows what he's talking about, or seems to. And I get this document that's replete with basically every aspect of the entire history of the development of radionics. This guy knows it all. I mean, he has researched all of it. He knows about Delabar. He knows about all of the others. He even knows about Kirlian photography. He knows how it all ties together, how it's all the same thing. He tells you how. And the appearance is that this guy, despite the fact that when you first go to his website, you just Google SE5 and radionics or something, you'll get to this guy's website. At first you're like, yeah, this is just another quack selling a piece of garbage for $4,000 and can't believe people fall for it. You look into a little bit, and number one, okay, yes, this guy is, I don't know, I think I'm beginning to realize the type, to recognize the type of scientific individual. There's a type of scientific individual that just couldn't care less what the mainstream scientific community thinks. They're concerned with the truth, they love the truth, and they'll find it through intuitive spiritual means just as easily as doing some experiment on any given day, and they don't care which. And they don't care what you think of it, and they don't care what you think of where they came up with this or that idea. They'll just give it to you. They'll just say, okay, here's how things work. Here's what we've discovered. And if you want to delve into it and read about some of the things that they've done to discover that, some of the research they've done as kind of a background, you can, but they're by no means taking this research and saying, okay, here's what we've done, therefore you must believe us. So it's kind of a different tack that these people seem to take, and I suppose it makes sense. I suppose if you get to a point where you really are an intuitive individual and you really are kind of much more in touch with your higher mind and things, then you're going to be less and less reliant on this nuts and bolts materialist scientific method per se. But that doesn't mean you cease to be rational, and it doesn't mean you cease to investigate things with a clear mind. In fact, you begin to investigate things, I guess, in a way, a much clearer mind than a scientific researcher who automatically outright assumes that there's no hocus pocus, there's nothing out there that we haven't discovered. Think about it. That's really the mindset. They're saying, there aren't any invisible energy fields. No, it's all explained in terms of the chemistry and things we understand. What's that saying? You're saying, there's nothing to be discovered. And here's somebody whose very profession is to discover things, and they're telling you there's nothing left to be discovered, only things left to be derived from the basic principles we've already established about the universe. I mean, if you think about it, there's got to be about the blindest statement you can make and the blindest mindset you can have as a researcher. And no wonder why despite the countless millions of dollars that are spent on conventional scientific research in health and medicine and things, no wonder why we still haven't cured cancer. We're still stumped by AIDS. We can't even figure out atherosclerosis. I mean, and that's something where you can just control with your diet. It's just ridiculous. It's like, no wonder why such blindness pervades all of our research that we, compared to the amount of effort and money expended, we get virtually nowhere. I mean, sure, people say, look at all the miraculous discoveries we're making all the time. But if you look at it the other way, it's like, yeah, it's a miracle we're discovering anything at all. And compared to the number of people doing research and the amount of money spent on it and the quality of their facilities and things, it's really pretty pathetic. And it definitely gets that the more you get into research. When I got into the PhD program and spent a couple of years as a PhD student, I ended up finishing up with a master's degree, but still, I was in the same program with all the other PhD students because that's what I was planning on doing. The more you get into it, the more you get that impression. It's like, oh my gosh, we don't really understand what's going on. We aren't really making very good progress. There is a ton of BS out there in these legit papers, and And it's really hard to find the quality labs and researchers that are doing something. Some of them are the ones that are well-funded. Some of them are not. And a lot of the ones that are well-funded are just good at playing the game, the political game of getting the money. And wow, you start to get pretty disillusioned pretty fast. So anyway, as I was curious and I was giving this guy the benefit of the doubt, like I always try to do, I got the book. And not only did this book touch upon just about everything else I read so far, I mean, it revealed a lot of stuff I hadn't. So, I mean, it even talks about the secret life of plants. And this was something that was never mentioned directly in the readings, but I happened to have it because it's dealing with these similar topics, right? Well, voila, this book ties it all together. So it's like, look at what happens. Douglas Cottrell reading recommends this Delaware book. Delaware book deals with radionics. This guy talks about the Delaware book and builds on it. And a lot of other people. The whole field is built on. This is like one guy in this massive field of radionics. He builds upon Delaware's and a bunch of other people's research. And he talks about the work of Cleve Baxter, the inventor of the lie detector. Cleve Baxter writes this book, The Secret Life of Your Cells, that it builds on. He didn't write the book. He got this guy, Stone, Dr. Stone, I can't remember his first name, to write the book for him, Robert B. Stone, Ph.D. But it's all about Cleve Baxter's work, and The Secret Life of Plants dealt a lot with Cleve Baxter's work, as well as Marcel Vogel and others. So, and they talk about each. I mean, the Cell book talks about The Secret Life of Plants book a lot. It's all starting to come together. I'm starting to see how there's been this army, if you will, of tremendously inspired scientific researchers. Two of the shining lights, among many others, Marcel Vogel and Cleve Baxter, who, and of course the Delaware and all the radionics people, but all these people who are beginning in mainstream science. They go through various stages in their career that all serve to end up preparing them for this whatever work they end up doing. And what they end up doing is some very tremendously like spiritual, higher mind inspired scientific research into this next step, this next field of endeavor, this next paradigm, where we're talking about the spiritual underpinnings, for lack of a better term, behind health and disease and our very existence and development and things. Both animate life and then inanimate objects all over the universe and the laws surrounding them and their development, like in the growth of crystals and things. It's very rich. These guys are very good. They're very on the ball. They're not quacks by any stretch of the imagination. And it's all out there. I'm just like skimming across the tip of this huge iceberg. So on the Book of Urantia side, I get this perspective that, gee, I've got a lot of reading to do with this book and a lot of these others before I really even feel qualified to go around and start talking about it. And then on the scientific research side, I'm like, gee, I've got a lot of books to read and a lot of research to catch up on before I'm really qualified to even find where the bleeding edge is to where I can begin to apply this stuff in my current scientific research. But don't kid yourself. I definitely plan to. I mean, it seems like the field of radionics has been developed to such a refined degree that it will be possible, it really seems, to get one of these devices, one of these advanced modern-day radionics devices, and clearly detect the vibrational signatures of like a healthy worm, a young worm, for example. I'm dealing with the aging of C. elegans nematode worms. So we could detect the entire, not just like a rate of vibration of a single cell or one part of this harmonic signature for a healthy cell. The whole worm, you can do it. In radionics, you learn you can do this at all kinds of different levels. You can look at an entire organism, you can look at a given organ, and eventually, according to Cottrell, yes, you could even get down to the level of individual cells and picking them out. But what are you really interested in? Like in my research, I'm just basically interested in, okay, what's the harmonic signature of a young and healthy worm? What's the harmonic signature of an old and dying worm? And if we can really just use resonance to improve this rate of vibration, to reestablish this young and healthy state, number one, you should be able to just use the regular radionics technique, which is by the same method you use to detect their harmonic signature, you can broadcast a harmonic signature, and then through resonance impart that health and wellness to an unhealthy organism. So, if all this is true, you should be able to use one of these radionics devices to not only detect that signature, but to greatly enhance the longevity of a population of worms. So that would be a first thing to try. But then, of course, the other thing to try would be to use the lasers like I'm using and say, okay, which type of laser treatments contribute the most towards restoring this youthful signature? So instead of having to do lifespan studies on a whole bunch of worms and take 3 weeks at a time, I can actually sit down, like in the course of one day, try like 50 different laser parameters and do the equivalent and just look at how I'm affecting this harmonic signature and do the equivalent of 50 lifespan assays in one go. And interestingly enough, this book starts to talk about, Cleve Baxter, he mentions several different cases of individuals that, because they were actually tuning in to this other side of things, they were able to eliminate all kinds of avenues of research that would have taken them years and years to exhaust before they realized that they were dead ends. And purportedly scientists like George Washington Carver working with peanuts and several others that he mentions, they were actually doing this kind of thing. So they may have not been using a radionic appliance, they may have been using their intuitive perception or some other means to detect these kinds of things. For example, there's this other lady I've mentioned that is able to hear, supposedly, these harmonic signatures herself. There does seem to be some kind of bleed over to hypersonics and so ultrasonic frequencies and these, so it's like, no, it's not really a sonic vibration. No, it's not really an electromagnetic vibration. It has something to do apparently with subatomic fields or some kind of the structure of subatomic structure and underpinnings of matter that have to do with vibrating energy, which starts to sound quite a bit like string theory as far as my limited understanding is concerned, or in quantum mechanics. But it seems like these various other methods of vibration are able to affect this other vibration. So I'll just look really quick and see if I can find, if I've bookmarked this lady's page so I can tell you who she is. But I don't, well, let's see. No, I don't think I've got her. So I'll have to find that later. I think what her work is really valuable. It seems like it's kind of misguided because she's claiming to know a lot about science that she doesn't, but it sounds like there's incredible things going on in her lab. So anyway, the rest of us can spend $4,000 and use a radionics appliance, right? There are some other guys that have cheaper ones that, I don't know. I really want to try this SE5, so I may contact the guy and see if I can get him to loan me one for scientific research or something, or see what we can work out. But yeah, I'm definitely not rich or anything. Back when I said it was no problem to drop $500 for a Douglas Cottrell reading, I didn't mean that was because I was rich. Realize that was a substantial sacrifice, but it was definitely worth it at the time. So no, I'm not financially independent by any stretch of the imagination, at least not yet. So some just flat out incredible stuff going on in this field. So the Don Paris book is something definitely worth picking up. It's kind of a really quick overview of the field of radionics, at least at the time it was written. I think like 93 was the first edition. They had a 93, 94, 98. And this is the 98 edition. So at that time, it would have been a kind of snapshot of the status of the field of radionics at that time. So the book by Don Paris, a very good one to look up. It's called Regaining Wholeness Through the Subtle Dimensions, where science meets magic. And then the other book that he talked about, and he talks about a number of other books too. He's really good at citing his references, so I'm probably going to end up buying a ton of books that this guy refers to. But one of them that really caught my attention right off is The Secret Life of Your Cells, which talks about the secret life of plants that I've already talked about, and it was designed to build on it. So we'll start with the first book, The Secret Life of Plants. I've talked about before, by Tompkins and Bird. Really fascinated about this. See, a lot of this preliminary work had to do with plants because they found out if you basically hook up a lie detector to a plant, you can get a reading. And I didn't realize it was just a lie detector they were talking about because I didn't really understand what a lie detector was or how they work. I mean, I understand what it is, but not how they work. So the inventor of the lie detector, Cleve Baxter, he apparently just got into the stuff. He had this inspiration to start trying it on plants, and he just went with it. And he's been, I don't know if he's passed on yet, but at least at the time this was written in 1989, I think he was in the 60s or something at the time, he was definitely still researching the thing. He had already spent 2 or 3 decades doing it. And this is a book of some of his research that got onto like mammalian cells and human cells, not just plants. So they were doing things like where you can take a sample of take a scraping from the inside of their cheek or something and get some cells, and those cells would still respond as if they were still in a human. And that sounds a lot like the radionics thing, where they take samples of a person to get their signature and things, and to do the remote transmission of healing and things like that. But so the book is called The Secret Life of Your Cells. It's by Robert Stone, and it deals with the work of Cleve Baxter. So it says, Cleve Baxter's latest research goes beyond the secret life of plants to discover and explore the secret life of your cells. So really cool book to pick up. I've gotten about a third of the way through it or something. These are all great starting points to really get into the field of radionics if you want to, and they're not even radionics books per se. I mean, this isn't. The Secret Life of Plants isn't. I mean, in a way they are, in a way they aren't. It's a broad field that deals with this, whatever you want to call it. The Don Paris, inventor of the SC5, he calls them IDFs, which are like intrinsic data fields or something, which would be those harmonic signatures. Whatever you want to call them, it seems like it's already been thoroughly researched, and it's continuing to be. It's really encouraging that these guys, they kind of established their own independent field of science, and they run with it. So just because mainstream science is too bigoted and sectarian, just like a religion, to consider the possibility, and it's not just that, it's like there seems to be a fallacy inherent in the scientific method, a fallacy inherent in the materialist mindset, and that is that the observer is not part of the experiment. When, even due to the Heisenberg uncertainty principle and things, we know, you can only know where an electron is or its vector. You can't know both. This whole idea where the observer perturbs the measurement, where when you, and they have some quote from some famous scientist, I don't know, it might have been Einstein or somebody, if they were saying, or it might have been Heisenberg too, I can't remember, or Schrodinger or whatever, they were saying how what we're observing with our scientific experiments is not nature. What we're observing is nature under our scrutiny. So it's like this is how nature behaves when we're examining it. It's not necessarily how nature behaves when we're not examining it. And that gets into the whole paradox of if we are influencing the experiment, you have to be a lot more clever at designing your experiments, and they can't be done in the brute force repeatable algorithmic kind of way, assembly line kind of way that our science is normally done. At least a lot of the nuts and bolts bench work is normally done. And then you can naturally see how it necessitates such a radical change of the approach in science and the thought and mindset and the scientific method that it's too big of a leap. It can't readily be embraced by mainstream science, but I think you'll just naturally run into these things. So this happens to be apparently one of these cases where you have to have a new type of science emerge on its own for quite a while and gain some momentum, gain some results before it will ever be able to be embraced by mainstream science. And then when it is, there'll have to be this huge battle of perspectives, kind of like the battles we've seen in the past when relativity was discovered. Lots of old diehards that went to their graves refusing to believe it. It takes a while for some of this to really happen. And it hasn't, in the grand scheme of things, been really that long. I mean, these guys were doing the first research in the early 1900s, so just a little over 100 years, or about 100 years, in the grand scheme of things. So we're just really getting started. But it's encouraging. It's encouraging to see a very well-established scientific field. And I'm just getting into it, but I'm definitely paying attention to it. I definitely respect it. I definitely realize there's a lot of quality stuff there. I'm sure there may be some things that they're off on, but a lot of really valuable information that I believe I'm going to be able to use in future research to augment and enhance the experiments we're doing and move things on a lot faster. And so hopefully we'll have treatments that can help people be a lot healthier for a lot longer. But also, hopefully we'll be able to kickstart this aging research community that seems to be kind of languishing. And heck, the organization I'm involved in, the Sens Foundation, they already kind of had to separate themselves from the mainstream scientific community to just be able to do a lot of this kind of research in just to admit that intervening in aging would be possible, and that's a goal, let alone looking into whacked out methods like I am, just using conventional lines of research. So I can kind of see a progression, where sometimes necessities are departures are necessary, but eventually we will come back around and we're going to join up with mainstream science. We're not going to leave it. We're not going to just dump it. And we have to use a lot of its methods. I was trained as a mainstream scientist, and still that dominates my perspective to a large degree, and I'm sure it will continue to, because obviously, look how far it's gotten us. There are a lot of valuable things in there. So, if you're really interested in that science part of it, definitely check out some of those books. If you're really interested in a lot of the development of this cosmology and world life perspective, and whether there's reincarnation or not, or relating to your fundamentalist Christian friends, or whatever your motivation, definitely look into the Book of Urantia and check out what it has to say. Don't just throw it in the garbage because it conflicts with some pet ideas. I think we've all got a lot to learn on all these fronts, and as I do, that's what I'll be doing. I'll be sharing them in these addresses, and at some point, probably a seminar series and some lectures around at various places. So until then, share and enjoy.